Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into something really transformative happening right now, the incredible boom in the electric vehicle market, EVs. Think of this as your quick guide, your shortcut, really, to grasping just how fast things are changing with our transportation globally and even down to specific countries. We're basing this on the latest 2025 report from Cognitive Market Research. It's packed with data looking back to 2021 and projecting all the way out to 2033. So, our mission today, let's uncover the real scale of this huge shift to electric. Okay, let's unpack this and see what the data really tells us.
It's fascinating, isn't it? What stands out immediately is just the sheer speed. The report really highlights how unprecedented this change is, and the whole landscape is shifting incredibly quickly.
So let's start big picture, the global view.
hmm
Because the numbers, honestly, they're kind of mind-blowing. You expect growth, sure, but this fast. Oh, get this. 2021, the global EV market was worth around $500 billion. Sounds like a lot, right?
Already significant, yeah.
But by 2025, just a couple of years, it's expected to nearly triple to about $1.4 trillion.
Yeah.
And then it just explodes. Over $11 trillion predicted by 2033.
11 trillion. It's almost hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. And here's where it gets really interesting, the growth rate. Globally, we're talking a compound annual growth rate, the CAGR, of nearly 30%, almost 30% year over year.
Exactly. And a KGR like that, nearly 30%, it's not just impressive growth. It signals a fundamental reorientation of, well, everything.
What do you mean by that? Like for industries?
Yeah, precisely. Think about the entire automotive sector, the energy sector. This kind of growth forces a complete overhaul. We're talking massive investments in battery tech, supply chains, charging infrastructure. Companies are having to pivot incredibly fast. It's reshaping manufacturing, investment, even geopolitics around raw materials. It's a profound change, not just incremental growth.
Okay, so a massive global shift. But where is this happening most intensely? Let's zoom in a bit. The report points very clearly to one region leading the charge, Asia-Pacific.
Absolutely. APAC is, without doubt, the powerhouse right now.
And the report mentions this idea of a technological push driving it there. What does that look like on the ground?
Well, it's about a few things coming together. You have massive scale, especially in China, with battery production. Companies like CATL or BYD, they integrate vertically, driving costs down. But it's also innovation. Think Japan and solid-state batteries or South Korea's advances. Plus, you have government support, dense urban areas where EVs make sense. It all feeds into this incredible momentum. It's this mix of scale, innovation, and market conditions.
And the numbers definitely back that up. Asia-Pacific started at around $245 billion back in 2021.
Right.
Expected to hit nearly $700 billion by 2025, and then soar to a massive $5.6 trillion by 2033. That's over half the projected global market.
It's huge. And their growth rate is the highest globally, too.
Yeah, regional CAGR of almost 30%. Now, within APAC, China's obviously the giant. It went from $65 billion in 2021, projected to hit over $1.5 trillion by 2023. That's a CAGR over 30%.
It's just phenomenal growth there. Policy and industry working hand in hand.
But look at India. This is maybe even more surprising. Starting smaller, about $39 billion in 21, but it's forecast to reach almost $1 trillion by 2033.
Wow.
And its CAGR is projected to be the highest in the region, nearly 31%. That's explosive.
That is explosive. It shows how quickly emerging economies can adopt and scale these technologies.
And it's not just them. Japan's looking at over $1.1 trillion by 2033. Strong CGR too, near 30%. Plus South Korea, Australia, Singapore, Southeast Asia, Taiwan. They're all showing really strong growth. CGR is mostly between like 28.5% and almost 31%.
So it's really a broad-based surge across the entire Asia-Pacific region, dominant.
Yeah. Okay, so APAC is leading with tech and scale. Let's shift gears to Europe. It's also booming, but the report suggests maybe different drivers. You mentioned policy-driven expansion.
That's right. Europe's story is very much tied to, well, deliberate policy choices. Think strict emissions regulations. The targets they've set are ambitious. Plus, significant consumer incentives, subsidies, tax breaks for buying EVs. And crucially, a big push on building out charging infrastructure. It's a very conscious effort to meet climate goals.
Makes sense. So how do the numbers look there? Europe started at about $65 billion in 2021.
Yep.
Growing to around $175 billion by 2025, and then forecast to hit $1.3 trillion by 2033. Still massive growth, with a CER over 28%.
Very strong, yeah. Not quite APAC levels, but still incredibly rapid growth.
And within Europe, Germany's a big player, right? From nearly $13 billion to over $275 billion projected by 2033.
Germany, the UK, France, they're all major contributors. The UK starting around $9 billion, heading towards almost $190 billion. France from $8 billion to over $150 billion.
Italy, Spain, too, showing similar trajectories, high 20s CAGRs. Even Russia, though maybe starting smaller, is projected to grow significantly.
Right, and don't forget the Nordics and Switzerland. Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland, all punching above their weight, showing really strong commitment and growth. CAGRs again in that 27–28% range.
So a really continent-wide push, largely driven by policy and climate goals.
Exactly. It's a different flavor of growth compared to APAC, but equally transformative for the region.
Okay, let's cross the pond to North America.
Mm.
The story here seems to be more about rising consumer interest, according to the report. What's sparking that shift in consumer behavior?
It's really interesting. I think it's a convergence of factors. There's definitely more awareness now. People understand the benefits better. Plus, critically, there's just more choice. It's not just niche vehicles anymore. You have electric trucks, SUVs, sedans from various brands. That visibility matters.
Range anxiety, less of a thing now.
It's becoming less of a barrier, yeah. Batteries are improving, charging stations are becoming more common. People see their neighbors driving EVs, they hear fewer horror stories.
Right.
That builds confidence. It's a perception shift as much as anything.
And that confidence is showing up in the numbers. North America, $88 billion back in 2021, growing to nearly $240 billion by 2025, and then surging to over $1.7 trillion by 2033. That's a CAGR over 28% too. Pretty close to Europe's rate.
Very strong indeed. Catching up fast.
And the U.S. is obviously the behemoth there, starting at $73 billion in 2021, projected to hit over $1.4 trillion by 2033. That's, wow, almost a 20-fold increase.
It's huge. The scale of the U.S. market means when consumers start shifting, the numbers get very big, very quickly.
Canada's doing well, too, from $9 billion up to nearly $200 billion forecast. And Mexico starting smaller at $6.5 billion, but still projected to grow to almost $130 billion.
Yeah, so solid growth across the continent, really fueled by that increasing consumer pull, maybe helped along by some incentives, too, but the demand seems key.
Right, so we've covered the big three regions. But this isn't just an APAC, Europe, North America story, is it? The report highlights emerging markets, too. South America, the Middle East, Africa. They're gaining momentum.
Absolutely, and that's maybe one of the most fascinating parts. It shows this isn't just a rich world phenomenon. The transition is truly global.
What's driving it there? Is it different again?
It's a mix. In some places, it's about leapfrogging, skipping older tech. In others, it's about harnessing resources or specific government initiatives. Lower running costs can be a big factor, too. But the point is, they're all part of this global shift, even with different starting points.
Okay, let's look at South America first. Market worth around $44 billion in 2021.
Yep.
Projected to hit nearly $1 trillion, $991 billion by 2033. That's a CAGR of almost 30%, right up there with APAC.
Really strong growth potential there.
And Argentina stands out, growing incredibly fast from about $7 billion to $174 billion projected, with a CAGR over 30%. Brazil's a big market, too, heading from nearly $17 billion towards $371 billion.
Shows significant activity and potential across the continent.
Then the Middle East. Started around $35 billion in 2021, forecast to reach almost $800 billion by 2033. Again, a CAGR close to 30%.
Interesting dynamics there, too, with oil-rich nations diversifying and inviting heavily in new tech.
Yeah, the report notes the UAE and Turkey showing CAGRs over 30%. UAE heading for $150 billion, Turkey $140 billion, Saudi Arabia leading the region overall.
Significant investment flowing in.
And finally, Africa, growing from about $28 billion in 2021 to over $600 billion projected by 2033, a CAGR over 29%.
Again, showing that broad global reach.
South Africa is highlighted as the top performer there, projected to go from around $11.6 billion to over $274 billion. That's nearly a 30% CAGR as well.
So yeah, these emerging markets are absolutely part of the story. Different scales, different local factors, but the overall trend is undeniably towards electrification.
Okay, wow. So let's try and bring this all together. We've seen the massive global numbers, the different regional drivers, tech, push in APAC, policy in Europe, consumer interest in North America, and this growing momentum everywhere else. The main takeaway seems to be, this isn't just growth, it's a fundamental transformation happening incredibly fast. The report calls the shift undeniable and irreversible.
I think that sums it up perfectly. It's not a question of if anymore, but how fast and what the implications are. So what does this all mean for you, listening? It means the future of transport is arriving much faster than maybe we thought. Understanding these trends, it gives you insight into everything from, what car to buy next, to how our cities might change, how our energy grids need to adapt. It's already happening.
Yeah, it really makes you think. And here's something to maybe mull over after this. We've talked about cars, regions, economics, but think about the ripple effects. How might these dramatic shifts reshape things we haven't even touched on? Urban planning, definitely. Energy infrastructure, for sure. But what about global trade patterns? Or even geopolitics tied to battery materials versus oil? What else could this rapid transformation impact that we maybe haven't even considered yet? Something to ponder. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive today. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're digging into something that's really changing everything about how we get around.
That's right. The global electric vehicle market, or EVs.
Exactly. We want to know what's really driving this huge shift, what are the key things pushing it forward, and maybe what's holding it back.
And we're basing this on some solid groundwork. This deep dive uses cutting-edge research from cognitive market research.
Right, so it's data-driven, gives us a proper look at the whole picture.
Yeah, a really robust understanding.
And that's what we want to bring to you today. Our mission here is pretty clear. Unpack the big drivers, the accelerators. Then look at the significant restraints, what's slowing things down.
The word blocks, yeah.
And finally, those game-changing trends that are just completely reshaping mobility.
So by the end, you should have a quick but thorough grasp of what's going on.
Exactly. So let's get started. Where do we begin?
Well, the research really points to some powerful forces pushing things forward. The accelerators, as you called them.
Okay, accelerators. And I guess the first big one has to be government action, right? Policies, incentives.
Absolutely. That comes through loud and clear. It's a major force. Governments worldwide are really stepping in.
How so, specifically? Is it just tax credits?
Well, tax credits and rebates are a big part of it, making EVs cheaper for you to buy. But it's more than that.
Okay.
There are strict zero-emission mandates in some places. Really tough co-Euro standards for manufacturers.
So pressure on both sides, consumers and car makers.
Exactly. And what the research highlights is that the consistency of these policies is almost as important as the policies themselves. It builds confidence.
Confidence for who?
For everyone, really. Consumers, fleet operators, but especially manufacturers who are making these huge multi-billion-dollar investment decisions.
Ah, okay. So they need that predictability.
They do. And you see regions like China, various countries in Europe and parts of North America really leading the charge here. They're creating that supportive environment.
Makes sense. Beyond policy, though, what else is pulling people towards EVs? There's an economic argument, too, right?
Oh, definitely. That's becoming increasingly compelling, with fuel prices doing what they do.
Going up, mostly.
Right. And just people being more conscious of costs generally, EVs start to look, well, quite economical in the long run.
So it's not just the fuel or electricity costs.
No, that's part of it, sure, cheaper per mile. But the data also shows significantly lower maintenance.
Fewer moving parts.
Exactly. No oil changes, less brake wear sometimes because of regenerative braking. It adds up.
Right.
And interestingly, the research also points to EV resale values holding up surprisingly well, better than many people thought initially.
So the total cost of owning one over, say, 5 or 10 years is actually looking pretty good compared to a traditional car.
Increasingly so, yeah. That long-term saving is becoming a major draw.
Okay, this next one feels huge. The technology itself, especially batteries.
Ah, yes, the spark, as the outline called it. And it really is central. The advances in battery tech have been, frankly, enormous.
How does that translate for the average driver, though? What's the real impact?
Well, think about the standard lithium-ion batteries most EVs use now. They've improved dramatically.
More range.
Significantly more range, yes. Faster charging times, too, which directly tackles that range anxiety people used to worry so much about.
That fear of getting stuck somewhere with no power.
Precisely, making them much more practical for everyday use, not just short city trips.
And you mentioned solid-state batteries earlier.
Yes, that's sort of the next frontier the research is tracking closely. They use solid electrolytes instead of liquid ones.
And that means?
Potentially greater energy density, so more range in the same size battery, faster charging still, and improved safety, less fire risk.
Okay, so that could be another leap forward then.
A really fundamental shift, yeah. It helps change the perception and makes EVs feel even more mainstream.
Right, so we've got government push, economic benefits, and tech advances. But it can't all be positive, right? There must be hurdles.
Oh, absolutely. The research is very clear on the roadblocks, too. Significant ones.
What's the biggest one? Is it still charging?
Yeah, that's probably top of the list. The charging conundrum, let's call it. Insufficient infrastructure.
Still. I feel like I see more chargers around.
You do, especially in cities. There's definitely an uptick in urban areas, but the disparity is still huge.
How so?
Rural areas are lagging way behind, developing regions even more so, and even in cities, reliable access isn't guaranteed.
You mean like finding a working charger?
Yeah,
Or having one where you live?
both. If you live in an apartment or don't have off-street parking, home charging can be a real headache.
Right.
And consistent workplace charging isn't universal either.
So it creates these practical worries for you as a potential buyer. Can I actually charge this thing easily for my commute? Can I take a long trip?
Exactly. If the charging isn't convenient and reliable, it doesn't matter how good the car is. It's just not practical for everyone yet.
Okay, charging infrastructure is number one. What else? Cost.
Yes, the upfront hurdle, that higher initial cost.
Even with battery prices coming down.
Even so, for many models, the sticker price is still noticeably higher than a comparable petrol or diesel car.
And that hits harder in some places than others.
Definitely. It's a major deterrent for price-sensitive buyers, particularly in emerging economies where that initial outlay is just too much.
It feels like a bit of a catch-22, doesn't it? They promise long-term savings, but you need the cash up front to access those savings.
That's the paradox.
Uh,
And it definitely puts people off before they even calculate those potential long-term benefits.
Does the research show when that might change? Like a tipping point where the savings outweigh the initial cost clearly for most people?
It's probably less a single tipping point and more about a combination of things. Continued battery cost reduction, for sure. But also better consumer education on the total cost of ownership, or TCO.
Right, looking at the whole picture, not just the purchase price.
Exactly. And more accessible financing options specifically for EVs. As that TCO argument becomes stronger and more widely understood, that sticker shock might lessen.
Okay. Infrastructure, cost. What else is holding things back? You mentioned batteries earlier.
Ah, yes, the supply chain. The raw materials needed for those batteries.
Like lithium. Lithium, cobalt, nickel. Yeah, those are the key ones. And relying on them creates its own set of challenges.
What kind of challenges? Finding enough?
That's part of it. Availability can fluctuate wildly. Think about geopolitical tensions affecting supply lines.
Right.
Mining disruptions. Limited capacity to actually refine the raw materials into battery-grade stuff.
So it's a bottleneck.
It can be, yes.
Right.
And what the research really emphasizes here is the push towards not just more supply, but sustainable and ethically sourced supply. That's becoming huge.
How are companies dealing with that? Well, there's a big focus on recycling, trying to recover those valuable materials from old batteries. Yeah. People talk about urban mining.
Using old products as the source.
Exactly, because these supply chain issues lead to price swings, volatility.
Which makes the cars more expensive.
Correct. And manufacturing bottlenecks. It can slow down production, inflate costs. It's a really complex puzzle.
Wow, okay. So significant roadblocks. But despite these, there are still major trends pushing things forward in new ways.
Definitely. And some of these trends are really transformative, pointing to quite a different future.
Like what?
Well, one thing that really stands out is just the sheer variety of EVs coming onto the market now.
Yeah, it's not just small sedans anymore, is it?
Not at all. It felt like that for a while, but now you've got electric SUVs, pickup trucks.
Pickups. That felt like a fantasy just a few years ago.
Right. And vans, luxury vehicles, even heavy-duty commercial trucks are starting to go electric.
So basically an electric option in almost every category.
Getting there, yeah. And that's crucial. It broadens the appeal massively.
How so?
Well, if you need an SUV for your family or a van for your business, or you just want a truck, there's now likely an EV option for you. Or there will be soon. It moves beyond just the eco-conscious early adopters.
Opens up whole new customer segments.
Exactly. It makes EVs relevant to a much, much wider range of people and businesses.
What other big trends are shaping things? Technology seems to keep cropping up.
It does, and it's not just the battery tech. It's the integration of smart connected features into the cars themselves.
Like what? better infotainment systems.
That's part of it, but it goes much deeper. Think about over-the-air software updates, like your phone
So the
gets.
car can improve after you buy it.
Potentially, yeah. Adding features, improving performance, then there's the move towards more advanced autonomous driving capabilities.
Self-driving features.
Increasingly sophisticated ones, yes. Plus remote diagnostics, the car telling the manufacturer if something's wrong, app-based controls for charging, preheating the cabin.
Okay, so the car becomes more like a connected device.
Precisely. EVs are really becoming platforms for this smart mobility revolution, and that appeals strongly to tech-savvy consumers who expect that level of integration.
Right, they want more than just transport, they want an experience.
Exactly.
Okay, one more trend. You mentioned sustainability earlier regarding raw materials. Is that a bigger theme across the board?
Yes, very much so. There's a growing emphasis on the whole life cycle. Sustainability and the idea of a circular economy for batteries.
Circular economy. What does that mean in this context?
It means moving away from a take, make, dispose model.
Hmm.
So focusing on eco-friendly manufacturing processes, using recyclable materials in the batteries,
Okay.
and finding ways to reuse batteries after their first life in a car is over.
Like what? What do you do with an old EV battery?
That's the second life application idea. They might not be powerful enough for a car anymore, but they can still store a lot of energy.
Ah, so you could use them for grid storage or home energy storage.
Exactly. Bundle them together, use them to store solar power or balance the grid, give them a valuable second career before they eventually get fully recycled.
That makes a lot of sense.
It does. And these efforts are really important. They tie into ESG goals, environmental, social governance criteria.
Which investors care a lot about now.
Increasingly, yes. And consumers, too. It reinforces the green credentials of EVs, positioning them as a genuine part of the climate solution, not just shifting emissions elsewhere.
Okay, so we have these drivers, restraints, trends.
Mm-hmm.
It all happens within a competitive market, right?
Mm-hmm.
How are the companies themselves navigating all this?
It's incredibly dynamic. You've got the established automakers, newer EV specialists, even tech companies getting
What
involved.
kind of strategies are they using?
All sorts. The research points to lots of strategic alliances, companies partnering up maybe on charging networks or battery production, mergers and acquisitions, obviously. Constant product innovation is key. Everyone's racing to launch the next big thing. And aggressive global expansion, trying to get a foothold in key markets around the world. It really is a race.
A race for market share, technological edge.
Both. Expanding their footprint, improving their tech, securing those supply chains we talked about. It's quite a battle. You see some surprising partnerships forming.
And just from a business perspective, how are the leaders staying ahead?
Well, the research we looked at from Cognitive Market Research dives into this. It mentions things like aggressive cost optimization strategies.
Trying to make EVs cheaper to build.
Exactly. Also, being really responsive to market shifts, like recovering from the pandemic's impact, and accelerating their digital transformation, not just in the cars, but how they operate as businesses.
So the research gives that kind of detailed view.
Oh, yeah. It covers metrics you'd expect, revenue, market share, profit margins, but also things like SWOT analyses for key players.
Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats.
Right. It gives you that strategic snapshot of who's doing what and how they're positioned to handle challenges like supply issues or launching new models that maybe capture a niche no one expected. It really paints a clear picture of who's setting the pace.
Okay, so if we were to wrap this up,
Mm-hmm.
it feels like the EV revolution isn't just something on the horizon.
No, it's definitely here, now.
It's happening right now. We've got amazing tech, like advanced batteries pushing things forward, the promise of smarter, cleaner transport,
Mm-hmm.
but also these really complex challenges like building out charging everywhere and securing all those raw materials sustainably.
It's a fascinating mix of incredible opportunity and significant hurdles. A truly remarkable time for the industry.
So maybe a final thought to leave everyone with. Given everything we've discussed, the tech leaps, the resource constraints, the infrastructure gaps, how do you see that tension playing out? You know, the balance between innovation racing ahead and the real-world challenges of resources and infrastructure. How will that shape this next phase of getting EVs truly everywhere?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? How that balance tips will likely define the speed and scale of adoption over the next decade. Definitely something to ponder.